I never thought much about my mother's dreams when I was a kid. I always knew she had this vision of the perfect daughter, someone graceful, charming, and seemingly flawless. She never said it outright, not in the cruel or obvious way, but there was always this gentle pressure in the air, a quiet expectation that hovered over our house like a scent I could never quite escape. I was her son. She would often remind me in small, almost careless ways, brushing my hair, fixing my shirt, telling me to sit up straighter. But deep down, there was this unspoken comparison she carried in her mind. I would sometimes see her sketching or browsing magazines that featured elegant young women, always smiling at the page, always muttering things like, "If only she were a bit older, if only." I never realized at the time that she wasn't some stranger. It was a template, and I was about to discover that I was closer to that template than I had ever imagined. I was 16 when the first incident happened. It started on a dull Saturday afternoon. I was in the attic, rummaging through old boxes, trying to find something, anything, that could entertain me. That's when I found it. A box labeled Mom's Special Projects, dusty and forgotten. Curiosity overpowered caution, and I opened it. Inside, there were dresses, shoes, delicate blouses, and even some jewelry. Everything smelled faintly of lavender and perfume. I froze. It felt strange, almost sacred, like I had stumbled into a secret room in someone else's mind. I picked up a pale blue dress, holding it against myself. My heart raced. It wasn't like I wanted to dress like a girl. I didn't even understand what I was feeling. But something about the soft fabric, the gentle way it felt against my skin, made me shiver with anticipation and anxiety all at once. Before I knew it, I was trying it on. My hands shook as I slipped into the dress. I wasn't graceful at first. It was awkward, confusing. I looked into the mirror and saw a version of myself that I didn't recognize. My reflection stared back at me, almost daring me to see the possibility of another self, a hidden self. It was then I heard her footsteps on the attic stairs. Panic gripped me. I quickly tossed the dress aside and tried to straighten my shirt as if nothing had happened. But when she entered, her eyes lit up in a way I had never seen before. It wasn't anger or judgment. It was fascination. "Oh, honey," she said softly, coming closer, touching my cheek lightly. "You have no idea how much I've wished for this moment." I didn't understand at all. I just nodded, confused and embarrassed, as she guided me down from the attic, still holding my hand as if leading me into some secret world I didn't know existed. That day, we didn't talk much, but I noticed the way she looked at me differently. Her gaze lingered longer, softer, like she was seeing something she had imagined all her life and had finally found it in me. Over the next few weeks, she began introducing subtle changes. My wardrobe slowly incorporated softer colors, my hair was styled differently, and she encouraged me to try new ways of moving, standing, and even smiling. It was disorienting at first. Every morning felt like waking up in someone else's skin, but gradually, the lines between who I was and who she dreamed I could be started to blur. I began to enjoy the attention, the care, and even the strange thrill of exploring this other side of myself. But there was also fear of discovery, of judgment, of whether this was really me or just an illusion she was creating. The real turning point came when we attended a family gathering. My mother had dressed me in a simple yet elegant outfit, a soft skirt paired with a blouse that accentuated my frame in ways I hadn't considered. As we walked into the room, I could feel every eye on me. Whispers floated through the air, some admiring, some questioning, but mostly intrigued. I was terrified, yet there was a strange power in the way I felt all eyes tracking me, in the way my mother's proud smile anchored me. That night, after everyone left, I stayed up late, staring at my reflection. I realized something important. This wasn't just about pleasing my mother. Part of me, deep down, was curious, was alive in a way I hadn't experienced before. I didn't fully understand it yet, but I knew my life was about to change. The days after that family gathering were unlike anything I had experienced before. Every morning felt like stepping into a new version of my life, one where my reflection had a voice I was only beginning to hear. My mother noticed my hesitation at first. She didn't push, not overtly, but there was this quiet encouragement in the way she arranged my clothes, the way she combed my hair, the way she would smile at me in the mirror as if saying, "This is you. This is who you can be." At school, though, it was a different story. I couldn't exactly show up in skirts and blouses yet. I wasn't ready for that level of exposure. But I experimented in subtler ways. Longer hair tucked behind my ears, softer expressions, even adjusting the tone of my voice when talking to friends. Some noticed, some didn't. Some laughed, lightly, but nothing cruel. But the truth is, the part of me that was exploring this feminine side, this version my mother seemed to see so clearly, was slowly claiming its space. It wasn't about attention or approval, it was about recognition, the first flicker of identity whispering back at me. One afternoon, my mother suggested we go shopping. Not for the usual boyish clothes, but for real experiences, as she called it. I was nervous, my stomach twisting in knots as we walked into a store filled with dresses, skirts, shoes, and the overwhelming scent of perfume. She guided me through the racks, her hands brushing mine occasionally, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was grounding. She asked me what I felt drawn to, and for the first time, I realized I actually had preferences. Soft pastels, flowing fabrics, textures that felt like they belonged on someone else entirely. I tried on a simple lavender dress, feeling the fabric glide over my skin. When I looked in the mirror, I saw myself again, but differently, lighter, freer, yet still undeniably me. My mother's eyes shimmered and she whispered, "This is beautiful, but not just the dress. You are beautiful." Her words sent a strange warmth through me, but also a pang of fear. Did she love me for me, or for this version she had imagined? The question lingered, unspoken but heavy. Returning home, the transformation continued, small but persistent. My mother taught me how to braid my hair, how to fold clothes neatly in a feminine style, how to apply minimal makeup to accentuate features rather than hide them. She never forced me, but every lesson, every gentle correction, nudged me further into this new self. And strangely, I wanted to go. I wanted to see how far I could take it, how fully I could explore this identity that had always been there in fragments, waiting for permission to grow. At the same time, a shadow of doubt haunted me. What would my friends think? My teachers? What would happen if anyone discovered the truth before I was ready? Every smile in the mirror came with the weight of a secret that felt both thrilling and terrifying. Then came the first real test of courage. My mother insisted I attend a local community event with her, a small festival in town. She wanted me to wear a simple, elegant outfit she had chosen. I froze when I saw it. A soft, knee-length skirt, a delicate blouse with lace trim, shoes that made me painfully aware of how different my movements would feel. But she smiled at me, radiating calm assurance. "Trust yourself," she said. And for the first time, I did. Stepping out of the car, I felt eyes turn, but not with judgment, curiosity, wonder, maybe even admiration. The way people greeted me, the way children stared for a moment and then smiled, the way strangers whispered compliments without realizing they were seeing me. Not the boy who had entered their world yesterday, but this emerging version that felt like it had always been inside me. I was exhilarated, but also exhausted. By the time we returned home, I felt both braver and more fragile than I ever had before. That night, alone in my room, I examined my reflection again. The person staring back was changing, yes, but so was I. It wasn't just about clothes or hair or makeup anymore. It was about posture, about confidence, about finding a balance between who I had been and who I could become. I realized that my mother's dream daughter wasn't an idealized stranger. She was a version of me that I had never allowed myself to see. And that realization was both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful because it opened doors I never imagined. Terrifying because it meant stepping into a life where the rules, the expectations, and even my own identity were shifting beneath my feet. Over the next few weeks, the transformation accelerated. I began experimenting at home more freely, trying on outfits, practicing walking in heels, learning how to carry myself. Each experiment was a step into unknown territory, and each step came with its own cocktail of fear and exhilaration. There were moments I wanted to run, moments I wanted to hide, and moments where I caught glimpses of myself in mirrors, windows, or even polished surfaces, and felt a spark of recognition, a sense of home. My mother watched quietly, her pride always tempered with gentle caution. She never forced me, never pressured me, but she never let me forget that she saw me. That alone was transformative. But the deeper the change, the more complicated it became. I started noticing my own feelings in ways I hadn't before, how certain outfits made me feel lighter, freer, how standing in a mirror for even a few minutes could fill me with both joy and confusion, how interacting with friends while holding on to my secret self became a delicate dance. And then one afternoon, everything shifted. I caught sight of myself in the reflection of a store window, fully dressed as my emerging self, and I realized I didn't want to be anyone else. Not just for my mother, not just for curiosity, but for me. For the first time, I felt a quiet, unshakable sense of ownership over this identity. And yet, the world outside my home remained unpredictable, full of challenges and unknowns. I knew that stepping further into this life would demand courage, resilience, and a careful balance between revelation and discretion. High school was always tricky, but now it felt like walking on a tightrope. I had embraced my identity at home. I had felt the joy and the power of seeing myself as my mother's dream daughter, and yet, outside, everything was unpredictable. Some mornings, I would catch my reflection in the hallway mirror and feel a surge of confidence, adjusting the way I carried myself, smoothing my hair, tilting my chin just slightly. Other days, even the idea of walking past a group of classmates felt impossible. I had to carefully navigate this dual life, one I could fully express at home, and one I had to temper in public. The tension was exhausting, but the more I practiced, the more natural it began to feel. One day, my mother suggested I try something daring. She wanted me to attend a small school club meeting in a subtly feminine outfit, just a skirt and a blouse that didn't scream attention, but still hinted at who I was becoming. My heart pounded as I got ready. Every piece of clothing felt like both armor and revelation. When I finally stepped out of the house, I felt the familiar thrill and fear mingling in my chest. I walked into the classroom slowly, hoping for invisibility, but also bracing for scrutiny. To my surprise, nobody stared, nobody laughed. They just accepted me in that small moment. It wasn't the full freedom I felt at home, but it was the first sign that maybe this identity wasn't as fragile in the outside world as I had feared. But not everything was smooth. There were subtle whispers, fleeting looks, friends who tried to joke, but whose words cut sharper than intended. I learned quickly how to measure reactions, to step back when necessary, to protect the fragile self I was nurturing. It was like walking through a fog, never sure which paths were safe. And yet, the more I practiced, the more I realized I could carry myself with dignity and grace, even in the face of confusion or mild judgment. Each small victory built confidence, but each misstep reminded me how delicate the balance still was. Home remained my sanctuary. My mother was my anchor, guiding me without ever forcing me, celebrating every success, comforting every doubt. One evening, she surprised me with a project. She wanted to help me create a personal lookbook, a collection of outfits, hairstyles, and makeup styles that resonated with me. We spent hours together, laughing, experimenting, taking notes, and photographing each look. I discovered sides of myself I hadn't known existed. The way certain colors made my eyes sparkle, the way my posture changed when I wore heels, the subtle curves my body could accentuate. I began to feel whole in ways I never had before, even if the outside world remained uncertain. Then came the turning point that shook me deeply. My closest friend at school, someone I trusted more than anyone else, noticed the changes. She cornered me after class one day, eyes wide with curiosity and suspicion. "Are you experimenting with girls' things?" she asked, voice low, almost afraid to say it. My stomach twisted. For a moment, I felt panic, the fear that my secret, my fragile sanctuary, might crumble. I wanted to run, to deflect, to laugh it off, but I couldn't. I had come too far to hide. So I nodded quietly, trying to gauge her reaction. Her response surprised me. Instead of laughing or judging, she paused, studied me, and then smiled gently. "Wow," she said softly. "I didn't expect this. But it kind of makes sense. You've always had this, I don't know, glow about you." Relief washed over me, and a strange bond formed in that moment. I realized that being seen, even partially, wasn't as terrifying as I had imagined. Some people, I began to understand, could surprise you with their acceptance. Others might not, and that was a reality I would have to navigate carefully. The weeks that followed were a mixture of exhilaration and trepidation. I began pushing boundaries further at home, experimenting with bolder outfits, hairstyles, and accessories. I practiced walking, talking, and sitting in ways that felt fully aligned with the identity I was exploring. At school, I remained cautious, testing the waters in subtle ways. Longer hair, softer clothing choices, a lighter tone when speaking. Each day brought a new challenge, a new lesson in resilience and self-awareness. I learned to balance confidence with discretion, and I began to sense the contours of who I was becoming, not just as my mother's dream daughter, but as my own person. But the real test came when my mother suggested we attend a small, local talent show. She wanted me to perform a short monologue on stage, dressed fully as my emerging self. My heart raced at the thought. Public exposure on that level was terrifying, but I also sensed that this could be a defining moment, proof that the identity I had been nurturing was strong enough to face the outside world. As the night approached, I felt a mix of fear, excitement, and a strange clarity. I was ready, in a way I hadn't been months before, to step into the spotlight, to show not just my mother's vision, but my own. The night of the talent show arrived with a mixture of dread and anticipation that twisted my stomach into knots. The air backstage smelled of popcorn, hairspray, and nervous energy, and everywhere I looked, performers of all kinds were stretching, whispering, rehearsing last-minute lines. My mother held my hand, her grip warm and steady, radiating reassurance I desperately needed. "You've worked so hard," she whispered. "Tonight, just be yourself. That's more than enough." I nodded, trying to believe her words, trying to ground myself in the courage I had built over weeks of private experiments and cautious public testing. When my turn came, I stepped onto the stage, feeling the lights wash over me like a wave. Every pair of eyes in the small auditorium turned toward me, and for a brief second, panic surged. My heart pounded, my palms sweated, my mind screamed to run. Then I caught sight of my mother in the front row, her eyes shining with pride and encouragement, and something inside me shifted. I straightened my posture, lifted my chin, and allowed myself to become the version of me I had been practicing for months. The costume, the hair, the subtle makeup, they weren't just accessories anymore. They were parts of me, extensions of a self that had always been there, waiting for permission to emerge. I began my monologue cautiously at first, my voice soft but steady. As I spoke, I felt a strange transformation happening inside me. The fear that had gripped me for so long began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of clarity and flow I had never experienced. The words I had rehearsed for hours weren't just lines. They were me speaking, fully, without compromise. The audience's reactions were subtle at first, attentive silence, the occasional nod, and then, slowly, smiles began to spread. I felt a ripple of warmth, validation, and, unexpectedly, joy. I was being seen, truly seen, and it was intoxicating. By the time I finished, the applause hit me like a physical wave. It wasn't overwhelming or judgmental. It was genuine. My legs trembled as I bowed, my chest heaving with exhilaration and relief. Backstage, my mother enveloped me in a hug, her voice trembling slightly as she whispered, "You are perfect. Absolutely perfect." I could barely speak, overwhelmed by the intensity of emotion. For the first time, I realized something profound. I wasn't just performing a role or fulfilling her dream. I was claiming my own space, merging her vision with my truth. After the show, things shifted in ways I hadn't anticipated. Friends approached me with curiosity and admiration, some hesitant, others surprisingly supportive. I realized that the courage I had summoned on stage had changed how I was perceived, not dramatically, not overnight, but enough to open doors I had never dared to knock on. And yet, the complexity of identity lingered. Some peers still whispered, some stared too long, some seemed unsure how to react. Each interaction was a reminder that the world outside home was still unpredictable, still a test of resilience. But the exhilaration of having stepped fully into myself was more powerful than any fear. Home became a place of reflection and celebration. My mother and I spent hours talking about the experience, analyzing each moment, laughing at my nervous flutters, marveling at the transformation I had undergone in a single evening. I began to understand that this journey wasn't just about clothes or makeup or appearances. It was about presence, confidence, and the courage to let myself be seen. Every shy glance I had once feared, every awkward step I had once stumbled through, had led me here, to a moment of undeniable truth. The following weeks were a blend of exploration and adjustment. At school, I continued to experiment with subtle feminine cues, softer fabrics, longer hairstyles, delicate jewelry, gentle shifts in posture and mannerisms. I learned to gauge reactions carefully, to step back when necessary, to protect the self I had been nurturing. I discovered an inner rhythm, a quiet power in walking the line between private expression and public discretion. I also began journaling about my feelings, documenting the transformation in a way that made it tangible, concrete, and real. Seeing my journey in words made it feel permanent, not just fleeting moments of experimentation. And yet, the transformation wasn't only external. I noticed shifts in how I thought, how I processed emotions, how I connected with people. I became more empathetic, more sensitive to nuance, more aware of subtleties in interactions I had once overlooked. There was also a deepening bond with my mother. Our relationship evolved from guidance and instruction to collaboration and mutual discovery. She celebrated my independence while still nurturing the parts of me that needed her support. I realized that the journey wasn't just about becoming her dream daughter. It was about growing into my own version of that dream, about blending her vision with the person I had always been beneath the surface. Then came the first truly difficult moment. A rumor started circulating at school, subtle at first, hints whispered in hallways and lunchrooms. I felt the familiar pang of fear. Fear of judgment, fear of exposure, fear of being misunderstood. But instead of retreating, I leaned on the lessons I had learned. I reminded myself of the stage, of the confidence I had felt when I allowed myself to be fully seen, of the pride in my mother's eyes. I realized that fear didn't have to define me. The path ahead would be challenging, yes, but it was also mine to navigate. I had tasted the power of authenticity, and I wasn't willing to let whispers or uncertainty take it away. The weeks after the talent show brought a mixture of triumph and unease. The exhilaration of having faced the stage and been seen as my emerging self lingered, but the world outside home reminded me that acceptance wasn't always universal. Some classmates began to act differently, some with curiosity, others with subtle judgment, and a few with thinly veiled hostility. At first, every glance, every whisper, felt like a spotlight on my insecurities. I caught myself retreating, wondering if I had gone too far, if I had misjudged my courage. The duality of my existence, safe and accepted at home, cautious and scrutinized outside, became more pronounced than ever. It was during this period of uncertainty that I realized something crucial. The journey wasn't just about clothes or posture or appearances. It was about inner resilience, about the ability to hold my truth in the face of doubt, ridicule, or misunderstanding. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at school, I sat in my room, dressed in an outfit that felt entirely like me, staring at my reflection. The person in the mirror looked confident, poised, yet vulnerable in a way that resonated deeply. I realized that the fear I felt outside was not a reflection of my worth, but a measure of the courage I was developing. My mother noticed my tension immediately. She didn't ask questions at first. Instead, she brought tea to my room, sat beside me, and simply held my hand. "You're growing," she said softly. "And growth is messy. People will react in all kinds of ways, but none of that changes who you are. What matters is that you know it yourself." Her words were simple, yet they carried weight. I realized that for the first time, I wasn't just reacting to her vision. I was internalizing it, merging it with my own sense of self. I felt a quiet strength, the first real awareness that I could navigate the world while remaining true to the person I was becoming. At school, I began experimenting with subtle boundaries. I tested the waters by wearing outfits that were neither fully masculine nor overtly feminine, skirts paired with sweaters, blouses tucked neatly into slacks, shoes that hinted at elegance without drawing overt attention. I watched reactions carefully. Some were curious, some confused, some encouraging. I learned to interpret these signals, to assert my presence without confrontation, to claim my identity while respecting the unpredictability of social spaces. Every small success, every nod of acceptance, reinforced my confidence. One particularly transformative moment occurred during a group project. I was paired with classmates I had previously felt wary of, people whose reactions to my changing presentation of self could have been unpredictable. I showed up in a soft, pastel blouse and a flowing skirt, carrying my work confidently. Instead of ridicule, I experienced surprise and eventually respect. My contributions were acknowledged, my insights valued, and my presence felt natural rather than questioned. It was a revelation. My identity did not diminish my competence, nor did it dictate how others would perceive me once they saw me fully. That realization was liberating. Home continued to be my sanctuary, the place where my mother guided me through subtle nuances I would never have considered alone. She taught me how to adjust expressions to convey warmth or confidence, how to practice posture that felt natural yet graceful, and how to explore style choices that reflected both my personality and the identity I was cultivating. These lessons were not about perfection. They were about exploration, discovery, and self-expression. I began to feel like I was truly inhabiting my own skin for the first time, and the sense of empowerment was intoxicating. Yet, despite the progress, moments of doubt remained. I struggled with the fear of exposure, the worry that someone would misinterpret my intentions, or that my identity might be dismissed as a phase. There were evenings when I would cry silently, torn between the joy of self-expression and the anxiety of societal judgment. During these moments, my mother's presence was unwavering. She never shamed me for my tears. She simply reminded me that identity was a journey, not a destination, and that vulnerability was part of strength. Slowly, I began to accept that fear and courage could coexist, that doubt could be a companion rather than an enemy. Then came a turning point that changed everything. My mother encouraged me to attend a small local art showcase, where participants could present themselves through creative expression. This time, there would be no stage, no spotlight, just an opportunity to exist fully as myself in a public setting. I felt a swirl of apprehension and excitement as we prepared. She helped me select an outfit that felt both comfortable and authentic, a soft, flowing dress in shades of teal, paired with subtle accessories that reflected my personality. As we walked into the gallery, I felt my heartbeat quicken. The space was filled with people, all engaged in their own creative worlds, and yet I felt seen simply for existing. For the first time, I realized that my identity didn't need constant validation from the world to feel legitimate. People might react, might judge, might misunderstand, but that didn't diminish who I was. I could navigate the world with my truth intact, finding pockets of acceptance and connection along the way. That night, my mother and I walked home hand in hand, the city lights reflecting softly in puddles from an earlier rain. I felt a profound sense of completion, not in the sense of arriving, but in the sense of knowing that this journey, messy, beautiful, challenging, was mine to own. By the time the seasons shifted and autumn settled into our town, I felt like a different person in ways I could hardly have imagined. The journey I had begun months ago, stumbling through curiosity, fear, and experimentation, had led me to a version of myself that felt authentic, strong, and surprisingly free. I no longer felt like I was merely fulfilling my mother's dream. I had claimed it as my own, molded it with my choices, and let it grow alongside the person I had always been. There was still complexity, of course. Life outside our home remained unpredictable, and there were moments of doubt and tension, but for the first time, I felt prepared to navigate it with grace. One crisp Saturday morning, my mother and I sat in the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, tea steaming gently between us. She smiled at me, her eyes soft with pride. "You've grown so much," she said, "and not just in appearance or style. You've grown in courage, in awareness, in presence. I always dreamed of a daughter like this, and now I see that it's really you." Her words struck me deeply, not because I hadn't known it, but because the weight of validation was finally complete. I realized that the dream she had carried all her life had never been about perfection. It had been about seeing potential, nurturing it, and celebrating it. And now I had experienced that potential in myself. The transformation had settled into a rhythm. I had refined my style, learned to walk and move with confidence, and embraced my emerging identity without fear. Each morning, I chose clothing, accessories, and hairstyles not out of obligation, but because they resonated with me. I experimented with colors, textures, and expressions, and I delighted in the subtle power of presentation. More than that, I had learned to carry myself in the world with an awareness of both who I was and how I wished to be perceived, balancing authenticity with discretion. It was a delicate, beautiful dance that required patience, self-reflection, and courage. School life became easier, too. I found a small circle of friends who accepted me, who supported me in ways that were gentle yet unwavering. The whispers and sideways glances had diminished, replaced by curiosity and, occasionally, admiration. I realized that visibility, once terrifying, could be a tool for connection rather than a source of fear. And in moments when judgment arose, I reminded myself of the stage, the talent show, and the art showcase, moments where I had stood fully in my truth and survived, even thrived. Those memories became anchors, steadying me when uncertainty crept in. One evening, my mother suggested we revisit the attic, the place where it had all begun. Dust motes floated in the sunlight as we unpacked boxes and sorted through dresses, shoes, and accessories. We laughed at some of the more extravagant items, marveled at the craftsmanship of others, and reflected on how far we had come. I picked up a soft lavender dress, one of the first I'd ever tried on, and held it against myself. I didn't feel the same nervous trepidation I had months ago. Instead, I felt a sense of continuity, a reminder of the journey, the growth, the courage it had taken to arrive here. My mother's eyes met mine, and in them, I saw both pride and love, a reflection of her dream realized in ways neither of us could have fully predicted. The final realization settled quietly, like a soft sigh of understanding. My mother's dream daughter had always been a vision, an ideal, but the real magic lay in discovering that I could embody it in my own way, on my own terms. Identity, I learned, was not a static concept imposed from outside, but a living, evolving journey that required courage, exploration, and a willingness to embrace vulnerability. I had stumbled, hesitated, and doubted along the way, but I had also grown, transformed, and flourished in ways I had never imagined. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a profound sense of peace. I was still me, still the person who had laughed, cried, and navigated uncertainty, but I was also more than I had been before. I had discovered strength in softness, confidence in vulnerability, and authenticity in transformation. My reflection in the mirror smiled back at me with a quiet assurance that I had earned, and I knew that the path ahead, while uncertain, would always be walked with courage and grace. And so, in the warmth of my mother's presence and the quiet power of my own becoming, I finally understood. The daughter she had dreamed of was not a stranger, not an ideal to chase, but a part of me all along. And now, fully embraced, she and I were ready to step into the world together.